This is Willow, a 15-pound Maine Coon who reigns like a queen. And this is Petty, a wild Bobcat kitten who should be roaming the forests. From the moment they met, the majestic house cat became a fierce protector and foster mother to the tiny, fragile Bobcat. Watch as Willow, with a purr of profound maternal concern, grooms the wild kitten, seeming to lick away his trauma with every gentle stroke. She wraps her enormous paws around him as he sleeps, a living wall of warmth and safety. She's not just cuddling him, she's teaching him. With patient lessons and gentle discipline, she curbs his wild instincts, showing him how to play without harm. But what tragedy brought this wild predator to Willow's doorstep? Stay close. What happens next will change how you think about family. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The air in the backwoods of rural Colorado hung thick and stagnant, heavy with the smell of pine needles, damp earth, and something else. Something acrid and sorrowful. Dr. Elias Vance felt it the moment he stepped out of his truck, the crunch of gravel under his boots sounding unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. He was a veterinarian, a man whose life was a testament to his love for animals. But some calls still managed to curdle the hope in his soul. This was one of them. He'd come on the pretense of a routine checkup for a breeder's dogs, a flimsy excuse cooked up after a worried neighbor had called his clinic with hushed concerns about strange yelps and the sight of small, wild-looking cats in makeshift cages. The property was a study in neglect. Rusted metal sheets leaned against tired-looking pines, and a series of wire mesh cages were haphazardly arranged in the shadows, half hidden by overgrown juniper bushes. Inside them was the source of the sorrow. Two female bobcats paced relentlessly, their powerful muscles coiled with a stress so palpable it was almost a physical force. Their eyes, usually intelligent and wild, were glazed over with confusion and fear. In the corner of their shared, cramped enclosure was a scene of pure tragedy. Three tiny spotted kittens should have been nestled safely against their mothers. Instead, the cage floor was stained with blood. The crushing anxiety of their confinement had driven the two mothers into a state of panicked delirium. They no longer recognized their own young. In the chaos, one kitten had been fatally wounded. The other two were clinging to life by a thread. Elias's professional composure fractured. He knelt by the cage, his heart a cold, hard knot in his chest. One kitten was a trembling, blood-matted ball of fur, its breathing a shallow, ragged whisper. A deep gash ran along its flank, and one of its hind legs was twisted at an unnatural angle. Its sibling huddled beside it, less grievously injured but still bearing the marks of the frantic, misguided attacks. What in God's name happened here? Elias's voice was low and dangerous, directed at the shabby-looking man who shuffled out of a nearby trailer. The breeder shrugged, a gesture of casual cruelty that made Elias's hands clench. Cats get crazy sometimes. Caged up, you know. There was no time for anger, no time for the lecture on ethics and humanity that was burning on Elias's tongue. There was only time for action. He looked at the smaller, more severely injured kitten. Its eyes, barely open, were the color of mossy stones, clouded with pain, but holding a flicker of something. A desperate plea. "I'm taking this one," Elias stated, his voice leaving no room for argument. "He won't survive the hour without immediate medical intervention. Consider it a surrender. Or I can call the sheriff and Colorado Parks and Wildlife right now. Your choice." The man, seeing the steel in the veterinarian's eyes, simply grunted and unlocked the cage. Elias gently scooped up the tiny, broken body, wrapping it in the emergency blanket he kept in his truck. The kitten, who he would later name Petey, let out a cry so faint it sounded like tearing silk. It was a sound of absolute agony and surrender. As Elias drove away, leaving the squalor and misery behind, he held the warm bundle on the passenger seat, one hand resting on its trembling side, whispering promises he wasn't sure he could keep. "Hang on, little guy," he murmured, his truck eating up the miles of dirt road. "Just hang on." Clara Vance was trimming roses in her garden when Elias's truck came speeding up the long gravel driveway, far faster than his usual placid pace. She set down her shears, wiping a smudge of dirt from her cheek as she watched him get out. The look on his face told her everything. In their 30 years of marriage, she had seen that look 100 times, a grim mask of determination hiding a deep well of empathy. It was the look he wore when the odds were long and a life was on the line. He opened the passenger door and emerged with the small, blanket-wrapped bundle. "Clara," he said, his voice strained, "we've got a critical patient." She didn't ask questions. She simply held the door open to their home, which doubled as a small, well-equipped clinic for emergencies. On the sterile steel table, under the bright surgical lights, the full extent of Petey's suffering was laid bare. He was terrifyingly small, weighing barely a pound. His fur was caked with filth and blood, and the gash on his side was deeper than Elias had first thought. His tiny leg was shattered. For the next several hours, the world shrank to the size of that small, broken body. Elias worked with the focused precision of a surgeon, his large hands surprisingly deft as he cleaned the wounds, stitched the delicate skin, and set the minuscule bones of the leg in a makeshift splint crafted from a tongue depressor and surgical tape. Clara was his silent, efficient partner, preparing saline drips, warming blankets in the dryer, and mixing a high-calorie kitten formula that they would have to administer drop by drop. Petey was unresponsive, a limp weight in their hands. His life was a flickering candle flame, and the slightest breeze of infection or shock could extinguish it. They worked through the evening and into the dead of night. The only sounds were the soft clink of metal instruments, the hum of the incubator they placed him in, and their own low, encouraging whispers. "Come on, little fighter," Clara would say, stroking his head with a single finger. "You're safe now. You can rest." By dawn, they were exhausted, but Petey's breathing had steadied. He had taken a few drops of formula from a syringe, a monumental victory. They had pulled him back from the precipice, but the journey ahead was still a treacherous one. They made a bed for him in a large dog crate in their living room, surrounding him with warm water bottles and soft fleece. He was still just a fragile whisper of a creature, lost in a world of pain. It was then, as the first rays of morning sun streamed through the window, that another member of the family made her presence known. Willow, their Maine Coon cat, was less a pet and more a reigning monarch. Weighing a solid 15 pounds with a magnificent plume of a tail and a ruff of fur like a lion's mane, she moved with a deliberate, majestic grace. She was the queen of the Vance household, and nothing happened without her silent, discerning approval. She leaped onto the armchair overlooking the crate, her tufted ears perked, and her wide, intelligent green eyes fixed on the new arrival. She sat perfectly still, observing for the better part of an hour. Elias and Clara watched her, holding their breath. A cat of her size and temperament could easily see the kitten as a threat, or worse, as prey. Finally, with a soft thud, Willow landed silently on the floor. She approached the crate, her movements fluid and cautious. She sniffed at the mesh door, her whiskers twitching. From inside, Petey let out a tiny, distressed whimper. And then, the miracle happened. A sound began deep in Willow's chest, a low, resonant purr that vibrated through the floorboards. It was not her usual contented rumble. It was a sound of profound maternal concern. She lay down in front of the crate, her massive body a furry wall of warmth, and continued to purr, a constant, calming thrum of reassurance directed at the broken creature inside. From that moment on, she did not leave his side. The most important figure in Petey's recovery had just reported for duty. The first few weeks were a delicate dance of survival. Elias and Clara continued their round-the-clock medical care, but Willow provided a different kind of medicine, one no syringe could deliver. When Petey was strong enough to come out of the crate for short periods, Willow was there, a mountain of patient fur. At first, Petey was nothing more than a shivering bundle who would instinctively crawl towards the nearest source of warmth, which was invariably Willow's plush belly. He would burrow into her long, soft fur, his tiny body dwarfed by her sheer size. And Willow, the regal queen, would lower her great head and begin to groom him. Her rough tongue was gentle, methodically cleaning his spotted coat, lingering on the places he couldn't reach. She licked away the grime of his past and, with it, seemed to lick away some of his trauma. When they slept, it was a sight that brought tears to Clara's eyes. Willow would wrap her enormous paws around the tiny Bobcat, pulling him close until he was tucked securely against her, a living, breathing, purring hot water bottle. Petey, who had been robbed of a mother's touch, had found something even more extraordinary. A mother of a different species, whose love knew no bounds. As the days turned into weeks, Petey began to heal. The gash on his side closed into a neat pink scar, and the splint came off his leg. He was tentative at first, but with Willow's quiet encouragement, he began to explore. His bobcat instincts started to surface. He would pounce on Willow's twitching tail, his movements still clumsy but filled with a burgeoning wild energy. This was where Willow's second and perhaps most crucial lesson began. Petey was not a domestic kitten. His paws held needle-sharp claws, and his jaws, even as a baby, were surprisingly strong. During one of their early play sessions, he got overexcited and batted at Willow's face, his claws extended. Willow didn't retaliate. She simply let out a sharp, guttural yowl, a sound of maternal admonishment. Petey froze, his ears flattened against his head. Willow stared at him, her green eyes unblinking. Then she slowly extended a paw and gently tapped him on the nose, her own formidable claws safely sheathed. The message was clear. That is not how we play. Control yourself. It was a lesson she repeated patiently, day after day. A growl from Petey that was too fierce would be met with a low hiss from Willow, prompting him to soften it into a questioning chirp. A bite that was too hard would earn him a gentle but firm pin to the floor until he relaxed. She was teaching him the subtle art of feline etiquette, curbing his wild instincts just enough to allow him to coexist in their world. He learned to soften his pounces, to sheathe his deadly claws, to turn a predator's snarl into a playful whimper. He was a bobcat being raised by a Maine Coon, and the result was a creature of beautiful, baffling contradictions. Petey grew at an astonishing rate. Soon, he was no longer the tiny waif who could fit in Elias's cupped hands. His muscles began to ripple under his spotted coat. His legs grew long and powerful, and the characteristic tufts of fur appeared on his ears. He was half Willow's size, then 3/4, then nearly her equal. Their play sessions became more rambunctious, a whirlwind of spotted and tabby fur tumbling across the living room rug. But through it all, Willow remained the gentle matriarch, and Petty, the devoted son. He would still curl up against her to sleep, his head tucked under her chin, their breathing synchronized. Elias and Clara watched the bond with a mixture of awe and a growing sense of unease. They had saved his life, but Willow had saved his spirit. They loved him fiercely, but they knew, with a bittersweet certainty, that their home couldn't be his forever. A bobcat, no matter how lovingly raised, was still a wild animal. One Tuesday evening, Clara was curled on the sofa, half watching the local news while she stitched a patch onto Elias's work jeans. Petey was dozing at her feet, his body twitching in a dream chase, while Willow watched over him from her perch on the mantelpiece. The news anchor was reporting on a recent animal cruelty bust. Authorities from Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the local sheriff's department raided an illegal breeding operation in the foothills. Clara's hands stilled. On the screen was footage of the property where Elias had found Petty. The same rusted cages, the same dilapidated trailer. The news report detailed how the breeder had been arrested and a number of exotic animals, including 2 adult bobcats and a single bobcat kitten, had been seized. "Elias, come quick!" she called out. Elias came in from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He watched the screen, his expression hardening as he recognized the place. The report mentioned the surviving kitten had been taken in by a licensed wildlife sanctuary for treatment and rehabilitation. Clara looked from the television to the sleeping bobcat at her feet. "Elias, a single kitten. Do you think?" The thought hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "It's possible," Elias said softly. "The timing fits. The location fits." A storm of conflicting emotions washed over Clara. The fierce, protective love she felt for Petey battled with a sudden, hopeful thought. Maybe Petey still has a family. The love of a veterinarian for an animal is a complex thing. It isn't just about possession or affection. It's about advocating for the creature's ultimate well-being, for what is right according to the laws of nature, not the desires of the human heart. That night, after Petty and Willow had been tucked in, they talked for hours. They had a duty to investigate. The next day, Elias made some calls. His reputation in the veterinary community gave him access to the right people. He spoke with a contact at CPW, who then put him in touch with the director of the sanctuary, a woman named Dr. Anya Sharma. He explained the story, how he had rescued a near-dead kitten from that very property just days before the raid. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Dr. Vance," Anya said finally, her voice filled with a stunned sort of excitement. "We've been treating the kitten we rescued. He was malnourished and had some nasty infections, but he pulled through. We named him Jasper. We thought he was the sole survivor. This is incredible." The confirmation settled in Elias and Clara's hearts with both joy and a profound sense of gravity. Petey's brother was alive. His only kin in the entire world was just a 2-hour drive away. They knew, with a certainty that was both painful and pure, what they had to do next. The following Sunday was bright and sunny, a perfect autumn day. The car ride to the sanctuary was quiet. Petey, unaccustomed to travel, sat in a large carrier in the back, letting out occasional confused chirps. Willow, in a rare exception to her homebody nature, had insisted on coming. She sat on Clara's lap in the front passenger seat, her posture regal, her eyes fixed on the passing scenery as if she understood the importance of the mission. The High Peaks Wildlife Sanctuary was everything the breeder's farm was not. It was a sprawling expanse of rolling hills and aspen groves, dotted with enormous naturalistic enclosures that blended seamlessly into the landscape. Dr. Sharma met them at the entrance, her smile warm and her eyes kind. "We're so glad you came," she said, leading them towards a secluded rehabilitation area. "Jasper is doing well. He's shy, but his health has improved immensely." They decided to introduce the brothers slowly. Jasper was in a large, fenced enclosure filled with logs, rocks, and native grasses. He was slightly smaller than Petey, his coat a shade darker, but the resemblance was unmistakable. He watched them from the cover of a small cave, his eyes wide and wary. Elias opened the door to Petey's carrier. Petey stepped out, his body low to the ground, sniffing the air. His gaze swept the enclosure and then locked onto the other bobcat. For a long moment, neither moved. The world seemed to hold its breath. It was a silent, primal conversation of scent and sight, a language humans could only guess at. Then, Jasper took a tentative step forward. Petey mirrored the movement. They crept towards each other, inch by cautious inch. When they were only a few feet apart, Petey let out a soft, questioning chuff, a sound Clara had never heard before. Jasper answered with an identical sound. It was like a key turning in a lock. The caution melted away, replaced by an explosion of pure, instinctual recognition. They rushed together, not with aggression, but with an overwhelming, joyous energy. They rubbed their faces against each other, purring loudly, their bodies intertwining. They nipped and wrestled, tumbling over each other in the grass, their movements a perfect synchronized dance. They were two halves of a whole, reunited. Clara felt a sob catch in her throat, and she leaned against Elias, who wrapped an arm around her. Even Willow, watching intently through the fence, seemed to mesmerized. She let out a soft, low meow, a sound of acknowledgement, perhaps even of pride. Watching them, so perfectly matched, so utterly at home with each other, Elias and Clara knew their decision had already been made for them. Their living room could never compare to this. Their love, as deep as it was, could not replace the companionship of his own kind. They spent an hour talking with Dr. Sharma, finalizing the details. The sanctuary would be thrilled to take Petey. He and Jasper could grow up together, in a safe, semi-wild environment where they could learn the skills they would need if a future release was ever possible. The goodbye was one of the hardest things they had ever done. Clara knelt down, pressing her face into Petey's fur, memorizing the feel and smell of him. "Be good, my sweet boy," she whispered. Elias scratched him behind his tufted ears one last time. "You've got your brother now," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Look after each other." As they walked back to the car, Elias looked at his wife, her face streaked with tears. "I bet Willow misses him already," he said softly. "And you do too, don't you, Clara?" She nodded, unable to speak. The pain of letting him go was sharp and real, but underneath it was a deep, resonant peace. It was the right thing to do. It was the ultimate act of love. Their lives settled into a new routine. Every weekend, without fail, they would make the drive to High Peaks, and Willow always came with them. She would sit by the fence of the massive bobcat enclosure, her tail wrapped neatly around her paws, and watch. She watched as Petey and Jasper, now sleek and powerful young adults, stalked imaginary prey through the tall grass. She watched as they chased each other up climbing structures, their movements impossibly swift and graceful. She watched as they lay basking in the sun together, grooming each other with the same tenderness she had once shown a tiny, broken kitten. And every time, as they stood there watching Petey live the life he was born to live, wild, free, and beside his only family, a quiet, profound happiness would settle over them. Willow would look up at Clara, her wide green eyes seeming to hold all the wisdom in the world, and let out that deep, rumbling purr. It was a purr not of possession, but of a job well done. A mother's work was complete. Her boy was finally home.